I'm very excited to be joined by two members of the GATED community, Sumanth and Beth. One of my favourite interviews recently was with two colleagues of ours, Michael Galope and Meredith Gill. And I say ours because you two are a lecturer at the University of Minnesota.
Yep.
Again, we are three scholars around the table. Three scholars and three musicians. Let's begin with a bit of background on the band. If I understand correctly, Rob Slifkin was a bit of a catalyst.
Absolutely.
For you. So
Yes.
could you explain for anyone who's unaware who Rob Slifkin is, where you encountered him and what impact that had?
Rob Slifkin is an art historian who teaches at New York University. He's a scholar of contemporary art. His first book was on Philip Guston's late paintings, the sort of paintings that became figurative and became quite controversial within the world of abstract expressionism, of which Guston was a very important early figure. The way I met Rob was that my ex-wife, at the time my wife, Gabrielle Gopinath, she was also doing her PhD in art history at the same time that Rob was in the art history department at Yale.
Yeah.
So I think at one point we had Rob and his wife, Amanda, over to our house for dinner or drinks or something. And we just started chatting with them about stuff, and it was clear we had lots of sort of points of, overlapping interests and things. And then Rob asked me, kind of out of the blue, so I have this country band, do you want to play in my country band?
Did you reveal that you played music?
Well, yeah.
How was he aware of that?
Well, he knew that I was a musician because I do music theory, I play piano. I think maybe at some point we talked about my having a band as a kid and stuff. But I don't really know, honestly. I think Rob wasn't that concerned about it. I think he liked the idea of just getting people that he liked and wanted to work with and just getting him in the band. I mean, his approach I thought was great in that way. It wasn't sort of fixated on the kind of musical skill level of a particular performer, but rather the kind of the vibe of the people he wanted to be around.
Yeah, the connection. And so you two were studying at Yale.
Yes.
And as you highlighted, music theory was something that you're working on, something that you now teach.
Yes, that's correct.
Before meeting Rob, though, is that the kind of music that you were listening to, that you were writing?
Not really. I would say that I was listening to two streams of things, mainly. At that point in graduate school, I had been long spending a lot of time thinking about listening to and sometimes advocating, promoting for different types of classical music, especially experimental classical music or contemporary classical music. And that was something that I cared about a lot. It was something that I ended up focusing on for my dissertation. I wrote my dissertation on the race politics of Steve Reich's early music, and to this day, those areas are certainly one of the things that I think about for my scholarly work. So there was that. There was an interest in classical music and contemporary classical music, and then I had, like I think a lot of people who grew up in the United States, was interested in rock and pop and grew up listening to the Beatles a lot. They were really important. My parents loved them, and so they kind of, I think, cultivated that love of them. Yeah. And then I think, other stuff I'd encountered along the way, because I grew up in Louisiana, outside New Orleans. There was a radio station, I think it's WWOZ, if I'm remembering correctly, and it was a station that promotes a lot of funk and soul, and James Brown and the Meters and these other groups would appear on it very regularly as well, and so I came to really love that music as well. And I think around the time the band formed, I may have been TAing for Michael Veal's class on funk music.
Oh, wow.
So, which was a terrific experience. I got to learn about so much more about Sly and the Family Stone, and James Brown's multiple bands and histories, and just a variety of groups that were doing different things, which I was really excited to kind of get into, as well as the kind of soul traditions. There was a good bit of time spent on the Stax sort of groups and Motown, and so the Funk Brothers, and then the Booker T and the MGs, this sort of the house bands of those labels were also really important. And so I was learning a lot about and kind of getting reacquainted with U.S. popular music, partly because in order to get into classical, or rather to get into the kind of music theory discipline in the 90s, you really had to be a classical music person. It was pretty hard not to do that, and even to this day it's still sort of expected that you're going to know your Haydn, your Mozart, your Beethoven, and your sort of 19th century war horses, and have a good sense of the sort of modernist canon of classical music, the 20th century. And so those things are they're the canon of the field, like the way Shakespeare is of literature, English literature, right? And so I think given that, I had kind of put popular music to the side for a while in the mid-90s while I was deciding I was going to kind of focus on this.
With that being your career.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it wasn't just a kind of self-interested thing. I mean, I really, really love classical music. It's important to me. I grew up playing classical piano. That's really my first instrument. I'm a pretty terrible guitarist, but as a
well, there's going to be evidence to the contrary
but,
in a few minutes.
But as a pianist, I can kind of tinkle around okay, and I think that was always the way that I loved making music. Playing the piano and classical music was the way that I started it. So I always feel like sort of my background in some way is very much classical music and piano music.
Yeah.
So a long-winded way of sort of getting into when Rob showed up, it was completely new to me in some ways. I didn't have any idea really of the country traditions, old-time bluegrass traditions in any deep way. But I did grow up in the South, and so
since
it was
you
around.
were 9, is that when?
Yes,
so you
since
were,
I was 9.
Yes. So and where in the South did you move when you were 9?
It's a place called Slidell, Louisiana.
Okay, and so when you were 9, 10, 11, like growing up in Louisiana, would you have been surprised to say watch this video or find yourself playing in the style of band that you're playing in now? What would the 10-year-old you think if they were to witness the current you?
That's really funny. I think I would have been surprised because my brother and I, when we got there, my brother's 2 years younger than me, and he and I made this pact with each other that we're not going to talk like them.
Yeah, the bio hinted at something like this. So.
Yeah, well, I had a teacher who, it was my 4th grade teacher. Her name was Miss Eversole, and she's from Alabama. And the first day of school, she said something like, take out your folders. The way she said it was just, it was more extreme than that in terms of the lilt and the...
People and their funny accents.
And more than anything, well, see, you have a lovely accent, but the thing is that at the time, it wasn't a matter of appreciating it or not. I simply couldn't understand what she was saying.
Right.
And so, and then I saw people taking out folders. Oh,
folders.
That's what that is. It was surprising, and I found it, that was like a mild moment of alienation. There were experiences of, hearing students receiving corporal punishment. There were, racism experiences that were extensive. And so I think, in that way, growing up in the South was quite a shock. I mean, and this was a, relatively affluent but politically very conservative area of Louisiana. And
you'd move, where were you born? Where did you come from?
I was born outside of Chicago,
in
a town called Chicago Heights, and then lived in the south suburbs of Chicago. And then my father, he kept being, he's a mechanical engineer, and he was employed in various companies that kept having financial problems. This was sort of the time of the 80s wave of, plant closings and deindustrialization, and at the time, the companies that he was sort of working for were facing closure for various reasons. Japanese competition was raised at the time as one of the issues. In retrospect, it's surely more complicated than that. But as a result, he was unemployed for long stretches. And when he got the job in Louisiana, that was one opportunity that he had that would end up being very stable for him. So as he moved there, and then we joined him shortly afterwards, he ended up, working the rest of his career there. He worked for over 25 years. And the company he worked for was Martin Marietta, and then later it became Lockheed Martin, and they built the external brown tank of the space shuttle.
Oh, wow.
So that was anyway, that's a fascinating aspect of his experience. But,
yeah. I'm glad that worked its way in.
It's a
good
funny story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, obviously the space and science fictional things have been important to me, just growing up and imaginatively, among other things. But
so, almost despite your experience in Louisiana, and strangely thanks to Yale,
yes,
you ended up coming around to the type of music that we've been hearing played beneath this conversation, and that as the current song, whatever it is winding to a close right now, we were about to witness you perform a little live. Is there a song?
Sure,
do you think,
let's do it. Let's do a little Breaking Ballad. What do you think?
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What would your Louisiana teacher think of this one?
Depends. I don't know.
Miss Emerson?
Who knows what she liked? Maybe she liked Rachmaninoff. As far as I know, I had no sense of her musical taste. Later, I had a Spanish teacher named Miss West, who was not especially southern in her accent, but she loved the Eagles. I remember her talking about how much she loved the Eagles. So, there's maybe some Eagles in this.
Okay, and this is on Country Hymn,
yes,
which is the record which came out last year, which we'll be delving into in detail post-performance.
Great, terrific.
But without any further ado, this is Breaking Ballad?
Yes, that's correct.
Like you knew I would. I made you love me. I was a part of your life. You'd stand above me behind the blade of a knife. Say my name. But I'm pledging my time. This gift of giving, it perpetrated my crime.
Don't have to like it, so just stay out of my way. Don't try to fight it, you know the words to say. Say my name. Play my game.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much indeed. It's a great song. I was listening to it earlier today, and some of the lyrics in particular are especially intriguing.